Texas Chainsaw Massacre is not a good movie, and that's saying a lot because I typically find redeeming moments in movies that I watch, and this one does have some redeeming qualities that I like, but a lot more that I really don't like. Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2022 is a direct sequel to the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 1974, and quick spoiler alert, it's not a sequel at all. We follow a group of young influencers that have decided to invest in the city of Harlow and potentially trying to lure in some other young influencers to invest in the city of Harlow. This whole concept is so 2022. But of course they had no idea that this was the hometown to the notorious serial killer Leatherface, and Leatherface ain't letting nobody take his town. With that synopsis out of the way, I typically grade my horror movies based on the following 4 questions. Is the killer good? Are the kills good? Is the main cast good or at least tolerable? And is the story good or at least tolerable? And it's in that order for particular reasons, because most times when the story's bad, if the first 3 are good, people typically like or at least pass a horror movie as being pretty good. Anyways, let's jump into these. And so is Leatherface a good killer? And honestly, he is by far the best part of this movie by a mile. They did an incredible job of making him menacing, brutal, and just an overall terrifying killer. And a lot of that had to do with the lighting in this movie. They just did a great job about lighting his face a certain way. I don't know, it just looked like just overall menacing and kind of like brooding and just older and withered. There's a couple of moments in particular, like this moment where Leatherface is in this police van slash ambulance. I don't know, it's a small town. Anyway, so he's in an ambulance type thing and he's driving down the road with his pseudo mother type figure as she's dying, and just there's this one moment where he glares at the officer that's in the back with him, and he's just got this half lit face, and it's just great camera work and lighting. There's also the scene that you guys saw in the trailer where he gets onto this bus and there's a blue neon lights, and it just looks really cool to see him standing there covered in the blood and is wearing the mask and everything like that. I don't know, he just looked really cool in that scene. Another thing I liked about Leatherface in this movie is I liked how he outsmarted his victims. For example, when he was in the big showdown with Sally Hardesty, he was using the chainsaw sounds to confuse her, and then he came out of an alley to attack her. I thought that was a really epic moment. Also, I really liked where he fooled Melody and he appeared at the top of the stairs and ended up throwing a hammer at her. It just there was a lot of cool moments like that where he just slightly maneuvered himself and used sounds and things like that to outsmart his victims. Speaking of that, he loves throwing things in this movie. He threw a chainsaw along the ground and ended up tripping somebody up to stop them from running away. It was just really creative and pretty cool. So are the kills good? And I would say 100% yes. Seriously, Leatherface had to kill 30 plus people in this movie, and yeah, it gets a little overboard and over the top at times, but the kills were overall pretty unique. Some of them were pretty stereotypical, but there were some really unique kills in this movie. An example being is there's a kill of one of the main characters in the kitchen, and rather than just showing him just killing the guy in the kitchen, what they do is they pull the camera out of the kitchen and into the dining room area, and you can see the door swinging open and close as he's killing this victim. He also not only stabs this guy in the throat, but he persists to beat his head in with a hammer, and yeah, it's over the top, but it shows just how savage this version of Leatherface is. Also, again, with the bus scene, I thought it was gonna be a joke from what I saw in the trailer. Yeah, it's pretty funny to see them hold up their phones and start live streaming him for a few seconds, but once he revved up the chainsaw and the massacre ensued, it was actually really crazy. There was probably about 15 to 20 people on this bus at this time, and it was just 10 minutes straight of Leatherface just hacking and chainsawing through every single person on the bus. It was really crazy, and I think personally, out of all the horror movies I've ever seen, this is probably the highest body count I've seen in just one scene alone. So if you're a fan of high body counts in horror movies, this movie definitely does not disappoint. So is the main cast good or at least tolerable in this movie? Plain and simple, I hated the main cast of this movie. I'm gonna chalk it up to bad writing because I don't think the actors and actresses in this movie were technically bad actors and actresses. I just think that the way they were written was completely annoying and forgettable. Let's start with Sally Hardesty, the leftover victim from the 1974 movie. She basically was a no-show for 90% of the movie, and the part she was in I just didn't care about. I know they were trying to go with the same vibes that they were doing with the Laurie Strode character in the Halloween reboots, but it just didn't work. Her final showdown with Leatherface at the end of the movie was just dumb. There's a moment where she has a shotgun pointed at Leatherface while he's basically taking his lunch break from just killing all these people on this bus, and she could have killed him right there. He's right there, just blow his brains out, but she didn't, all because he didn't remember her from the 1974 time frame. And I'm like, oh, that's so infuriating. screaming, "Just shoot him!" He must have thought it was dumb too, because he didn't even try to kill her. He just said, "I'm coming off my lunch break. I'm just gonna go kill the rest of these people. You can just sit here and gawk at me if you want." Her role was so small and unnecessary that they could have completely removed her from the movie and it wouldn't have mattered. Two of the main characters die off really early in the movie and they aren't important anyway, so let's focus on the primary main characters, which are the two sisters, Melody and Lila. Lila is the younger sister and she's a survivor of a school shooting, and I wish they would have fleshed that out a little bit more, because this actually was a pretty interesting story arc for the movie. Like toward the end of the movie, she had this moment where she was conquering her fear of guns, because obviously that's going to be a pretty traumatizing event to have to get over, but she mustered up the courage to pick up a shotgun, go after Leatherface, and she did shoot him a couple times. But prior to that, we really didn't get much exposition to build up to this critical moment in the movie. The older sister Melody is the primary antagonist for this movie, and her motivations just absolutely don't make sense. I mean, she literally has no purpose in this movie outside of just being here for the finale of the movie. I just don't understand why she was in this situation, why she came to Harlow in the first place. I mean, you can argue that she was here with her friend, she was gonna move here to help support her friend's business adventure, but I don't know, it just the whole thing just didn't make sense of why she was the final victim in the showdown. A primary example of this is that she's focusing so hard on this older lady's situation, which is Leatherface's mother type figure, and the reason why Leatherface inevitably starts killing again, but that's besides the point. But she's focusing so hard on this situation with this older lady, and I don't know, it just didn't make sense, because up to this point she showed very little regard for the rest of the people in the town. She seemed to be dismissive of anybody else, but for some reason she was just focused in on this lady, and when she passed, it's like the whole world ended. It just didn't make any sense. Overall, we just didn't learn anything about her. I was completely indifferent as to whether she passed or what happened to her in the movie, because she just didn't matter. So overall, is the story good or at least passable? I didn't mention this at the beginning, but the movie is an hour and 23 minutes long, and it feels like the longest hour and 23 minutes of my life. The reason being is because there was zero world building or character development. Seriously, I'm not joking. There's only like 15 minutes of exposition where we get very little information about what's going on, and the rest of the time is spent shoving as many violent moments and kills in our face as possible. We just didn't have any time to breathe or learn about the city of Harlow or Leatherface himself or just any of the characters. We just got nothing. That's why I said this is not a sequel to the 1974 movie. This just does not support that movie in any way, and it just feels like another Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. The only thing you can kind of say is they reference the other movie a few times, and Sally Hardesty is in here at a half-hearted attempt of a final showdown, but outside of that, this could have completely been removed from the movie because it didn't matter in the end. I will say that Leatherface's reasons for starting up his killing spree again is pretty decent. He lost his mother type figure because these kids came into the town to kick him out of his home for some reason, and that inevitably started the death of his mother type figure, so it does make sense and was kind of interesting, I guess. I feel like by just saying that I'm reaching at this point. The story wasn't good. What I explained in the synopsis is everything you need to know, and you could just fast forward to the killing and all the violence in the movie, because that's exactly what they did for this movie. Overall, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a complete unnecessary addition to the franchise. It does nothing to build the story of Leatherface as a character, and it does nothing to push the franchise in a particular direction. If you could care less about the story and you just want to see Leatherface massacre 30+ people on screen for an hour and 23 minutes, then this is the movie for you. Otherwise, I think fans of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise will be disappointed, and you should go back and watch the 2000 Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake, because that's a much better movie. Anyways, make sure you check out my other reviews and reactions on screen right now, because I promise you don't want to miss those. But let me know down in the comments below if you thought this movie was good, or if you think it absolutely stinks. Tell me why down in the comments below, and as always, we'll see you next time.